Okay, let's get started. First of all, thanks so much to everybody from coast to coast here in Canada. I mean, the feedback that we've gotten around this webinar, it's a record-setting day for us. We have never had almost 300 people on Teams, let alone for a webinar. So clearly it's a topic that's hit. So really appreciate your support. Really appreciate you working with us from coast to coast. My name is Joshua Diaz. I am the director of our emerging markets and Western Canadian business operations for Bureau Veritas. I've been with the company for 17 years. And so, this particular topic is really to give an introduction to PFAS and for your sampling success. My colleague Andrew, who has been with the company in May, will be 20 years. He has done just about every job as it relates to sales and service within the company, which includes being a project manager, being an account manager, supervising the service team. So he understands the process from a laboratory side really, really well. He has been within the PFAS space for the last year and a half or so. We have been doing PFAS for well over 10 years. One of our colleagues, we do work for both Canada and the US. Stephanie manages our US component and Andrew manages our Canadian component, along with eDNA. So I'll turn it over to Andrew to kind of get us started, and Andrew, I'll manage the participants from now on. You're on mute.
In my efforts to keep everyone quiet, I muted myself. But yeah, thanks to everyone for dialing in. We look forward to sharing some knowledge today. This is the first in our ongoing series of PFAS talks, and so what we wanted to do was sort of get more information out to the market space that's hard to get to at conferences and things. So we have a great lineup of speakers across the coming months, and so they're all listed on Eventbrite. You can go and sign up, and we look forward to your participation in those. And we got some great topics and great speakers there. But why don't I start with a little background for Bureau Veritas. We are a large testing and inspection and certification company. We're almost hitting the 200-year mark of being in operation across the globe. We have well over 75,000 people. We deal with a heck of a lot of customers for all their testing needs, and we have a lot of offices and labs across the globe. But here in Canada and North America, we have a bunch of facilities, and we really focused here on the testing and inspection and certification in a wide variety of markets, whether it be environmental, rail, buildings and infrastructure, the energy and oil and gas markets, as well as food testing. We support a lot of industries. As you're dialing in, you may have noticed that we have a couple of live polls going on at the same time. So if you scroll up to the chat, or if you see them there, feel free to add your responses. We're curious to know your thoughts on where you sort of sit on the spectrum of PFAS knowledge, and what your sort of expectations of future sampling might be in the PFAS market. And if you do have any questions along the way, throw them in the chat, and we are going to try and review them towards the end, and hopefully we can answer some questions as we go. So today, I hope to cover for you sort of a real basic understanding of PFAS, what it is, some of the regulations that are applicable for it, the methods that we use to test, and then what successful sampling would look like for a PFAS program. So if you're new to PFAS, and I see there's certainly some responses that are saying little to no knowledge of PFAS, it's hard to turn these days if you don't see it On Netflix, there's certainly some movies where PFAS is the main villain of a couple of movies, and then in the media, there's certainly a lot of attention on both the litigation side of things and lots of news about the harmful effects and contamination of PFAS. Just to give you sort of some numbers perspective, I think it was late last year, 3M was fined in court, and the payout was over $10 billion. And even some of the expected cleanups of PFAS are in the billions of dollar ranges. And when you think of PFAS, the things that sort of come to mind are the ones that are well publicized. You know, Teflon frying pans, Gore-Tex and firefighting foams have been the main culprits. But what you may not realize or may not know, it's used for such a wide variety of products, and it's found in all things from cosmetics to sunscreens. You will even find it in your food containers and in the interiors of cars and car seats for kids. So what is PFAS? Just going to turn my camera off just in case I get like, oh. So it was discovered by accident in late 1930s by a chemist by the name of Roy Plunkett. He was working on Freon refrigeration for DuPont at the time. And they found this substance that seemed to be highly heat resistant. Took them about 10 years to bring that to market, and they marketed under the product name Teflon. Sort of throughout history, there was evidence or thoughts that it leads to toxicity, and that PFAS was the culprit of that. And then not until the late 2000s or early 2000s, you started seeing some manufacturers phasing out PFAS in their packaging or in the products that they use. And it's only been in recent times, in sort of the last 6 to 8 years, where we're seeing litigation for contaminated drinking waters and rules and regulations around PFAS usage. So what is it? So PFAS, which stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, essentially are a mixture of really strong organic compounds with their main structure being carbon and fluorine. And those are really strong chemical bonds. We don't find them naturally in the environment. They're all synthetically man-made. They range in carbon lengths from sort of 2 to 12. And the good thing with PFAS compounds, well, I guess it's the bad good thing, they're really good at what they do. And so they were used in many, many applications across the globe. And I think the number of compounds continues to grow. Every time we do a presentation, it seems to be more. The current count is there's well over 12,000 plus identified PFAS compounds out there, and that number seems to grow daily. They're really good at being heat, oil, stain, and water resistant. They're very effective when it comes to suppressing fire, especially in firefighting foams. They don't degrade well, and if you've heard about PFAS, you hear this term forever chemicals quite often. They're miscible in water, they're semi-volatile, and it's really hard to destroy them. And so some of the only effective remediation techniques so far, lots are good at concentrating it, but really the most effective so far seems to be destroying it at high temperatures. And what we're finding, that it's been so widely used that it's being found in areas across the globe, almost from Arctic to Antarctic ice caps and everywhere in between. And the reason it's so bad, or why they believe it's so bad, is that it has a very similar chemical structure to fatty acids. And so the understanding is PFAS seems to easily replace the processes in human bodies where that fatty acids would normally take. And so it leads to a number of complications with that replacement. So major sources of impact so far, primarily you see it as a result of fire training or responses to fire, and that's been in the form of the AFFF, the firefighting foams. Whether it's been practicing on site or a response when those foams are washed off or the runoff has gotten into water streams. The other big obvious one is as a result from industry. DuPont, 3M, and other manufacturers, either runoff or spills have contaminated nearby water sources. And then you see it going through the cycle and accumulating in things at wastewater treatment plants, like via biosolids, or as it eventually makes its way to landfills, where it's being found there as well. We're lucky here in Canada that we don't have any major sources of manufacturing, and a lot of states or hotspots have been the result of firefighting activities. But you can see in comparison to our friends south of the border, they have a lot more assumed active PFAS contaminated sites. So how it gets into your streams, because it doesn't break down well, it seems to sort of live in every part of the cycle where you may find there's been a contamination, and then that goes either to a landfill, that goes back to a wastewater treatment plant. Those biosolids could be used on farming as feed or fertilizer, and then it continues that cycle. And so because of its strong nature, it can easily pass through the whole system. So regulation-wise, it really has been one that's been emerging, and Canada has sort of been slow to provide regulations or real guidance, and it hasn't been until the last few years that has had some teeth into some of the regulation. It's certainly been there's certainly been applications or regulations where you can't produce it or make it anymore, but from an environmental practitioner perspective, there hasn't been a lot. Most recently, there's been some draft drinking water regulations come into effect where it's sort of treating PFAS as a total, but a lot of them have really been focused on just a couple of compounds. We do expect that this will be an emerging area, and I suspect over the next coming months or years we'll see a lot more rigor around regulation coming into effect. So to sort of give you a snapshot, not until sort of 2016 where the EPA gave advisory on parts per trillion levels of PFAS and PFOA, and then you see Canada has slowly followed suit in applying various guidelines and recommendations. And not until more recently, last year, Health Canada released its draft state PFAS report with recommendations there. And so I'll give you a quick snapshot across the country of sort of levels. So Health Canada has its drinking water draft objective where it's looking to for totals down to 30 nanograms per liter. Environment Canada has released some guidelines for just PFAS. Nova Scotia has some in effect, as well as some of the other provinces have released some guidelines. Most recently, as recent as last week, the EPA released its final drinking water guidelines, and this had been awaited on by industry, and it provided actual final maximum contaminant levels, and so this is really one of the first regulations that's now legally enforceable in the States, and it's going to see a lot of water systems have to take action in the next couple of years to start monitoring, and if they do have levels of PFAS over those amounts, that they'll have to start taking action. So if you've been in the environmental world for a long time like me, you've probably dealt with other contaminants like VOCs or hydrocarbons, and there's so much knowledge and history with testing with those that we have a good understanding chemically of sort of the profiles and the compounds we're looking for. The challenge with PFAS is because there's so many combinations of chemical compounds and iterations of PFAS out there, it becomes a mixed bag of practitioners when dealing with a site that has a release or has a PFAS problem, on determining how they're going to assess and what they're looking for. And so when it comes to an investigation impacted with PFAS, you really need to look at a suite of tools, and it's not just as easy as sort of a run-of-the-mill test to navigate sort of your results and things. And so here at BV, we developed sort of what we've dubbed the PFAS toolkit, and it comprises of three separate tests, or three separate approaches to assess PFAS, and the main one, CEMS. And this is what all the major methods have been, or recognized methods via EPA or other jurisdictions have based their PFAS testing on. We are accredited for all methods, and so most of the guidelines have been based on analysis by PFAS, analysis by LCMS, and so this is what I expect we'll see added to regs, but there are a couple of other approaches. So I'll walk you through how LCMS works. And there's a couple of our beautiful new instruments sitting in the lab. So essentially, there's three major components for analyzing PFAS. One is extracting it into a solution, and we do that with a solid phase extraction. And so this is a technique in which compounds are dissolved or suspended into an extraction mixture. We separate them out, we isolate them, they're purified, and we're able to put them through the HPLC to separate them, and we're able to then analyze them. And so here's sort of the process from start to finish on the instrumentation. So on your left, you have that solid phase extraction where we're extracting all the contaminants. Then the HPLC is essentially sorting them into chain length so that we can put them through the mass spec and detect the various compounds. So we, as Josh mentioned, we've been testing PFAS for 10 or 12 years now, and it really has, the methodology has evolved over time, and you probably hear reference to a lot of PFAS methods, and so you'll hear 537 or 533 thrown around, or 1633 is newer, And so they developed over time as analysis needs changed. And initially they were looking at drinking water and some of the short chain PFAS compounds. And so you saw 537 evolve. They then realized there's more compounds to look at, and so they devised another method to complement the initial one. So 533 would then evolve, and then they realized there's more applications, and so more recently you've seen the emergence of 1633, which has been useful for all other matrices other than drinking waters. So when it comes to dealing with this in the lab, it's been a challenge to change methods. Over you run some samples on one method and then you have to flip, and so it's become a sort of an inefficient approach to all the evolving requirements of testing methods. And so what we've done over the last number of months, we've actually taken the best pieces of all those methods and combined them into what we're sort of calling a unified or a one method approach. And this gives us a few things. It gives us a efficiency in the lab that we can run more samples in batches and process them with quicker turnaround times. But we're expecting changes to come with PFAS, and the current methods, EPA 537, 533, and 1633, are very prescriptive in both their extraction process and the number of parameters that you can report. The methods are designed around the parameters. With our sort of unified approach, we're developing it with the flexibility that we expect more compounds to emerge, and so we're going to be able to add those compounds to this testing approach. And so when you have sites that you're looking for, as many parameters as you can find, we hope to be able to add them as they come. And the benefit of sort of doing an extended list, what we're seeing in the market, there are only guidelines for a few known compounds, but we're certainly seeing a shift from either those that are advising companies on their future liability or sort of future-proofing sites, that they're wanting to get the best snapshot of what may happen down the road. And so we are seeing, although there's criteria for only a few things, we are seeing requests for the longest list as possible. One of the things we've learned with PFAS, there's also this phenomenon of fluorinated compounds actually breaking down into PFAS compounds. And so we developed what we call the TOPS assay, which is essentially a process where simulate the oxidizing of PFAS precursor compounds, and then we do an after test and test to see if they are in fact converting. And so it's a good signal to run this oxidation that you may have a future problem of PFAS on your site. So here's just a quick, whoops. Let's go back. So essentially you're looking for sort of the end products of PFAS compounds by oxidizing the sample. And so these may, what may be there is not quite detectable or is not on a parameter list yet, but by oxidizing it into potential PFAS compounds, you can make an assessment there for future liability. And the third tool in the toolkit is total organic fluorine. And so this is sort of a screening approach where you're looking at the amount of organic fluorine as as a proxy for potential PFAS compounds. And so essentially, you take a sample, you remove the inorganic fluorine, and then through incineration, you're taking a measure of any of those bound fluorine molecules and using that as a proxy for PFAS detection. So it only gives you a total number. It doesn't speciate, but on sites where you may be chasing sort of high contamination, it can be a quick approach to seeing where a plume may have occurred. And so it's not cut and dry when or where you would use all of these, and we certainly support projects that use one, two, or using all three to sort of assess what's happening. Like I said, I think PFAS by LCMS will certainly be the recognized method for compliance and of sites, but you can certainly utilize some of the other tools to make a solid assessment of what's happening. They do have some limitations and advantages. LCMS, it is a long test. You know, it is involved. It's not quick and easy like some of your metal and hydrocarbons, and so there is a lot of hands-on manual time, and so there is a cost limitation compared to sort of a quick and easy test like your TOF, which is much more like your total organic carbon sort of approach. When you run the TOPS assay, you end up running it twice, and so we do a before and after look at your sample along with an oxidation step. And so if you have questions on a particular site, certainly reach out to us and see what methods might be applicable for what you're doing. And so the reason everyone came today was to figure out how to have a successful sampling program. And so what we've found over the years, programs have certainly changed, and we've learned a few best practices, and hopefully you can take some tidbits away and incorporate it into your sampling guidelines. I think every sampling program sort of starts with asking the right questions. What target compounds are we looking for? Are we restricted by methodology approach we should be taking? Is it for regulatory purposes? Is it for an investigation? How is your data going to be interpreted, or is there any specific detection limits that you need to meet? And what I suggest for any sampling program, not just PFAS, engage your lab partner. Talk to them about your program, your reporting deliverables. If you have any specific reporting criteria or turnaround time requirements, engage them early. Let them know. We can help coordinate sampling logistics. We can provide containers. And then if you have any special sort of protocols, or if it's a legal project, they can all be handled up front, and it's the best way to set up a successful project. And so when it comes to PFAS, it's good to have some pretty rigorous sampling controls. It helps if you do have a good program, it really helps to support defensible sample taking. You do have to ensure that your sampling supplies are PFAS free, and that any water that you use for blanks and things on site is also PFAS free. And just check with your lab if they've tested the water supply that they send you, as it can be a source of PFAS cross-contamination. And so the big no-no for PFAS is obviously avoiding anything with Teflon, which there is a lot out there for sampling supplies. So like I said, engage with the lab, request the plastic containers. Glass is no good for PFAS sampling. And so you want to get those, the proofed plastic containers, and ensure they don't have a Teflon lid. A lot of environmental sampling containers have a Teflon liner in the caps. You want to make sure you have the ones that do not. And so some of the common household items that I sort of alluded to earlier that may contain PFAS, there's certainly a lot of field sources. And so you want to make sure your samplers haven't used hand creams or using Teflon tubing for any pumping materials, or balers are not Teflon lined, or your split spoons don't have Teflon liners. And so, because we're looking at parts per trillion levels, and so there is a good chance if you are using those items in the field that it could pick up in your samples. So here's a quick sort of do's and don'ts. Water-resistant field books, water-resistant or stain-resistant gloves, using those blue ice packs or decontaminating equipment with Vertex shoes or jackets, and a lot of cosmetics and moisturizers, sunscreen, or even bug repellent are all the don't list for sampling. And then so on the other side, there are alternatives that are for use with PFAS sites. I always recommend taking blanks on any sampling program, particularly with PFAS, because there's so many other sources of potential contamination. If you're only going to look at one, I would suggest taking an equipment blank. It's probably going to be the single most useful QC on a PFAS site, just because of all the sources that could lead to cross-contamination. And so from going from the field to the lab, I said earlier we're analyzing parts per trillion sort of levels, and so to give you perspective, like 1 part per trillion is the equivalent of 1 second in 32 years, or I believe it's the same as 1 grain of rice in like an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And so we're looking at really, really low levels. And then even some of the detection limits are another 50 times lower than that. And so we have a really rigorous program and massive efforts to ensure all our lab conditions are pristine and are PFAS free. And then we because PFAS is quite unique and complex, we have a pretty rigorous proficiency program for any of our PFAS team, and they have to go through almost up to 6 months of training before they can process and analyze PFAS samples or customer samples. Each method has different specifics, and we expect to evolve over time as well. And so we have constant training and continual proficiency of our team, particularly in the PFAS group, compared to other areas of the lab. One thing to consider when you're working with your lab there are different levels of or different approaches to testing, because PFAS can be such a complex mixture of compounds. It does exist in both sort of branched and linear chemical structures, and you want to make sure that any of the standards that your lab is using has both, because it can lead to bias if you're not looking at one or the other. And so you can always ask if their standards are branched and linear, or if they're one or the other. We have learned along the way as well, and in collaboration with a couple of customers, we do find PFAS can be a finicky test, and we are seeing in some samples and projects where we are sort of seeing stratification of contamination, or we're seeing, in particularly wet samples that have some solids in it, we're seeing partitioning, and then we are noticing more so than other tests that it is susceptible to a lot of environmental inhibition, which if we don't remove some of that during the extraction process, that can mask some of the results that we're looking for. And one thing, you can't talk about PFAS analysis without talking about sample reworks. Because it is a complex test and it can be quite sensitive, it is susceptible to a high rework rate. And so a rework is essentially any time where we've had to re-extract or reanalyze the sample. And it could be from a multiple things. It could be inhibition from matrix effects. It could be, there are some regulations that if one of your QC requirements don't meet, you have to rework the whole batch. It could be, we noticed that a lot of surrogate recoveries are often not ideal due to something happening in the matrix, and so the extraction efficiencies are low, and so we would rerun that, or if there's been another QC failure. And so I think we've spoken to a lot of industry experts and sort of our partners in the States who deal with a lot of PFAS sampling and analysis. And sort of the average rate of rework, I think was 40% last time we sort of had a market assessment. We've been fortunate that our rework rate has dropped down to 40%. We are seeing that dropping as we work through this year. And we have a great team that's consistently making improvements sort of week over week to improve that rework rate. And by having less reworks, it really just improves your turnaround times and consistent on-time results. So I challenge anyone to make sure, if you have a project that is on tough timelines, to let us know or let your lab partner know and confirm on how you're doing with reworks, because it is something that's real with PFAS. I think what we sort of see in other testing groups, that have a much longer history of testing, like volatiles and hydrocarbons and metals, we see our sort of average rework rate down at less than 1% of samples. And so it's just something to be mindful of on short turnaround time projects. And so what we see sort of coming as next for PFAS, we certainly expect some more.
Fuck off! Seriously.
I hope that wasn't directed at me. We do see criteria sort of emerging. I expect, like I said earlier, we'll expect to see more coming from provinces. I'm sure Canada will take the lead from the US, and we'll see we'll see more rigor around regulation there. I know Quebec has announced some biosolid regulations, and I expect we'll see it in starting to emerge in other areas like CFIA and other sources, sort of food or landfill regulations will be the next ones to drop. What we also see from a corporate perspective, there's a lot of interest, probably because there's such a heightened social media awareness of PFAS. And so there's a lot of pressure on large corporations to include either a PFAS contingency plan or an assessment of properties with PFAS or future liability. And so we're seeing, although they may not have known contamination issues, large global firms are incorporating it into sort of their environmental sustainability reports, or they're concerned about future risk of PFAS, or where we're seeing council suggesting to start gathering data now PFAS for the expectations of potential future liability. And so we haven't seen a lot of litigation in Canada. I think the US is well over 6,000 litigation cases. In Canada, there's only, I think there's less than half a dozen so far. But not every industry is immune. And so there are going to be some with a higher rate, manufacturing, oil and gas, and other industries. But even things like hospitality or other industries do have susceptibility of some PFAS litigation down the line. So not everyone is immune. And so the challenge ahead, we certainly see from a lab perspective, when methodology is rapidly evolving, there's challenges with keeping up with regulations and methodology there. There's certainly a shortage in the marketplace of overall testing capacity, and finding trained individuals that can adequately analyze PFAS. And there's an overall learning curve. There's certainly individuals in the industry that have been dealing with PFAS for a number of years, but it is new and it is emerging, and so there's a lot of new players to the space that are trying to get the best understanding as quickly as possible to be able to provide great feedback for their customers. And so that sort of brings us to the end. It was drinking from the fire hose, but really just wanted to give a basic understanding of PFAS and some of the aspects of it there. I encourage you to take a look at in Eventbrite for the upcoming webinars that we're going to host. And hopefully, I don't know, Josh, if you want to close out, and maybe we can try and address some questions that are coming up in the chat there. Or maybe Josh left us. Oh, okay, maybe no Josh. So let me look through. I think one of the questions are disposal options in Canada. I'll admit, being the lab, we're not the most well versed on that. I know incineration has been very popular. There are a lot of treatments and remediation options out there. A lot of them focus on concentrating it either into a smaller area. But I think there's still a lot of news to come on disposal options and things, because we suspect it is probably already in landfills, and so they probably don't want to take any more risk on taking more PFAS samples. But I do expect there'll be some updates to come on that. Typical turnaround times for methods. We, as a sort of a standard approach, we are using around 15 to 20 days for testing. It is a long extraction. It is a long analysis period. We are expecting, as once we implement sort of our new unified approach, that we're hoping to bring that down to maybe 10 to 15 days for testing. I see a lot of questions on it's available. I think we can. We've recorded it. We can post the video for anybody that missed it that you want to share with your teams. And we can probably, for everyone that's registered, we can send a copy out. Yeah, we have a great question from Brian. Given how widespread PFAS is, what would trigger testing from a site? I think you're going to have to do some really good digging on your phase one. If there's been any history of fire training or a fire on site, that's probably going to be your primary source. But I would suspect in the coming years we may see it get added to something like in Ontario, Reg 153, or even potentially it could be added to excess soils down the road. So testing soils versus groundwater, similar approach. Avoid all the Teflon lined apparatuses, and so I think your approach is similar. You just put it in a typical soil jar versus the water container. Should be fine. So I think municipal waters, I don't know of any personally. There are a few, I believe, wastewater treatment plants and things that are looking into potential PFAS monitoring. There's nothing regulatory driving ongoing monitoring at this point that I know of, but I suspect that we will start to see more rigor around testing of municipal waters or wastewaters. Another good question. Do we expect provincial governing bodies to start requiring landfills to include PFAS? I couldn't say with certainty that we've heard anybody will, but I just my opinion, I suspect it will be coming at some point. That there'll either landfills or biosolids or something will drop at some point, requiring them to test. And in the absence of standards, a lot of people are sort of defaulting to the Health Canada guidelines of 30 nanograms per liter. So I think that kind of covers it all. If anyone has any other quick questions, they can drop it in the chat, and we'll make sure that it's available to those that registered, and we'll also send out a quick survey so that you have contact information, and you can certainly reach out to us for all your PFAS questions. So thanks for attending, and like I said, go and sign up for our future ones, and we hope that this was informative as a basic jumpstart to your PFAS and forever chemical journey. Thanks a lot.